Welcome Pokemon to another episode of Pokemon TCG Mythbusters. This is a series where we look at certain cards within the Pokemon TCG and talk about what you can do, what you can't do with these cards. This is amazing for players who are new to the game or are trying to figure out a new way to make their decks a bit more viable. By the way, before we start off, all the information that I'm going to give you guys is from my own personal experience, both using the card and also playing against the card. And we're going to start off with today's card, which is Spikemuth. Spikemuth is a stadium card which came out in Darkness Ablaze, and it's pretty good. I pretty much like it. It has a condition where whenever a player's active Pokemon moves from the bench during their turn, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. That seems pretty good. So the first thing we're going to start off is, does gusting effects work? No. It has to be during their turn to do it. So you can't do something like Boss's Orders to chip on 2 damage counters, because then it just won't work, because it's not their turn, it's your turn forcing them to switch. So the only way you get the 2 damage counters on is if you force your opponent to switch during their own turn. This can be done with things like special conditions like paralysis or confusion or anything like that, or even just making them switch entirely. Do the damage counters go on the Pokemon that is retreating or the Pokemon that has come out into the active? It goes on the Pokemon that is retreating. So say for example, if you have a Pokemon up front and you retreated someone on the bench, the one that you bring to the bench will have the damage counters on it. So if you are trying to pick out a Pokemon, make sure you try and force them in the active so your opponent has no choice but to bring them back to the bench. Does retreating also count for this effect to work? Yes. Doesn't matter how they get to the bench, as long as they get there during their turn, 2 damage counters gets put on. That means things like Switch, Mallow and Lana, or even retreating would force your opponent to have 2 damage counters on them. If the active Pokemon goes back into my hand, will I still receive damage counters? No, because remember, it's going to the bench. So there is a way to counter it with things like Super Scoop Up and also Scoop Up Net. So if you use things like that, it won't put damage counters on because it's not moving to the bench, it's moving back into your hand, which is pretty good actually. If I use Mallow and Lana to heal up my Pokemon, will the damage counters work before or after Mallow and Lana is put down? It works before. So remember, the way it works is that Mallow and Lana heals the damage once they go back onto the bench. But Spikemuth works with the damage counters before they get put to the bench. So if you have a Pokemon that's on 20 HP remaining and you switch to the bench, chances are you're going to get that 20 damage before you get the healing. Because looking at it in the way of Pokemon TCGO, you always get the healing when your Pokemon hits the bench. You never get it when the Pokemon is up front. And also, if you use this card in the online game, you'll see that you get the damage counters before the Pokemon goes to the bench. If I use an attack that has the condition of switching the Pokemon on the bench, will I still get the damage counters? Yes, because it's still within your turn. Whenever you do an attack and there's a condition with it, that still counts as your turn. It never goes as your opponent's turn. So therefore, if you do use an attack, say for example Hitmonchan, because that's the first Pokemon I could think of, that does 30 damage and switches to the bench, that 20 damage would still get put on because it's still within your turn. And also vice versa, if you have a Pokemon that has an attack that swaps your opponent's bench Pokemon out, it won't affect them because it's still within your turn. In terms of what this card can go well with, we actually did a video on Vanillux the other day. If you guys want to check that out, I should remember to put it in the description below. But it does also work with a lot of cards. Like I said in the beginning, it works really well with special condition Pokemon, considering that no one wants their Pokemon kept up at the front with a special condition. So it does work well with things like Team Yellowhorn, the new card from Darkness Ablaze, which confuses both active Pokemon, but be careful because that also confuses you, and unless you have something like a full heal, then it might be a bit tricky to not get damage counters on yourself. There's also something like Charizard and Braixen's GX attack that burns and confuses if you've got enough energy on. So yeah, there's a few cards that do a lot of status conditions as well. Raichu that paralyzes. But yeah, there are a few cards that do a lot of good special conditions, and Spikemuth is, being in mind it's not a tough stadium, and since it's a normal stadium you can just get rid of it with another stadium or even a Marshadow, it's still pretty good to get a little bit of chip damage on. But be careful, because again, anyone could just put up a stadium and get rid of Spikemuth, so pick your timing very, very nicely. But I think in terms of Spikemuth, that's all the information that I have on it for now. If you guys have anything else that you want to add, put it in the comments. Again, we're here to help each other out. If you guys want any cards that you want to see in this episode of TCG Mythbusters, by all means, again, put them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to try it out. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed, always click like and always click on the video. Guys, always welcome back, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Alright, guys, take care, and I'll see you all later. Okay, bye!